Hey everyone, Nathan here, Absurd Being. Okay, Totality and Infinity. So section 4, Beyond the Face. This is the last section, excluding the conclusions. We've got the conclusions to come, but this is the last kind of bona fide section. And we're going to be looking at A, B, and C, the A, B, and C subsections in this video, the ambiguity of love, phenomenology of eros, and fecundity. And in this section, the gloves come off really for Levinas here. He just goes, it's like he's held himself back for the whole book, just dropping in little bits and pieces, little tastes of his religion, of Judaism. And now he's just like, okay, that's it. I'm going for it. I'm going to drop everything on you that I can in one go. So this is all about, he just goes all in on connecting all of his philosophy to religious ideas. And it's really just it's a terminological fest. He just goes crazy with terms and trying to weave these into his philosophical narrative. I'm going to hold off on ranting about that. I am going to rant about it a little bit later, but I'm going to rant at the end of the next video because there's I want to give it all to you first, and then then explain what I think of it, what I think he's done, and why. My opinion. But anyway. That aside, so beyond the face, the idea in this section is that we're going beyond the other that we've seen in the face already, the encounter with the face, going beyond the other in the face in two ways. In the first, we're going beyond to an other that leads back to the I, and this is love. And the second way we're going beyond the other is to an I, which is other. And that is fecundity. So that's kind of how we're going beyond. That's what it means beyond the face. There's this zone, this realm, which is deeper than the encounter with the face that we've looked at so far all through the book. And it manifests in these two ways, love and fecundity. The first aspect then, the first part, subsection A, the ambiguity of love. Love for Levinas is situated at the limit of immanence and transcendence. So, as you would expect, the other is always transcendent, is always other, even in the love relationship. But there's more immanence here. They're more approachable, perhaps, than they are in the encounter with the face. There's less of a that sense of height, the other coming down to us from an infinite height. So in love, we move towards the other as an alterity, but with a movement that is not desire, not that capital D desire we talked about, that metaphysical desire. Rather, it moves towards the other, or the movement that is towards the other in love is need. And if you remember the difference, desire and need, desire was that metaphysical metaphysical desire for the infinite transcendence. Need, however, was something immanent. It was something we could satisfy. So it's kind of a blend of both of those. That's what love is. It's on the limit between that need, movement towards the other as something we can grasp, and a movement towards the other as something infinitely, absolutely alterity, as something which is an absolute alterity, absolutely other. So we're going beyond this. The movement towards the other in love is not the movement of discourse. It's not the movement, it's not the encounter with the face. And so Levinas says this goes both further and less far than language. So it's kind of just capturing that idea that discourse, language, was bound up with the encounter with the face, with that transcendent, absolutely transcendent alterity. But it still preserves that, but there's also this other more immanent need that is associated with love. And that's why he calls it the ambiguity of love. It's both, it's this kind of mixture of immanence and transcendence. And that's basically the first part. The second part is the phenomenology of eros. So as you might expect, phenomenology of eros, what we're looking at here is that kind of how we experience love. That's kind of what phenomenology is, a description of how of an experience, of human experience. So the question, how does the other appear for us in love? How do we experience them? And we've already noted that love is an equivocation between immanence and transcendence. And so they appear for us, the beloved appears in its immanent aspect as a fragility or a frailty, something kind of, right there that we can take care of, I guess. And its other aspect, its transcendent aspect, Levinas calls this an ultra-materiality. So this is the way they are non-signifying, the way they are beyond, absolutely beyond. And I think this is a reference to the otherness, to the absolute alterity. And Levinas mentions the other here in relation to this transcendent aspect as escaping its form and slipping away toward a future. So just always, that idea of escaping their form, that's something we've talked about a lot with the encounter with the face. The other is never never reducible to a particular form, a particular fixed comprehension that we have of them. They always escape that. And that's what we see, that's the transcendent aspect in love. So he describes this with a nice expression: the essentially hidden throws itself toward the light without becoming signification. The other, the beloved, kind of it appears in the light, but never as something we can totally lock down. So again, just capturing that ambiguity. Levinas calls this aspect, or calls this kind of ambiguity, profanation, as in the profane. And the profane is this simultaneity of the clandestine and the exposed, which I think of here as like the mode in which the beloved appears, the mode in which the object of our love appears, as something hidden, and yet as also something that is there, that is in the light. And this kind of makes sense, the word profane here. You can see, there's obviously the religious connection, but that this is not a bad word for this, I think. Trying to glimpse something which is actually an absolute alterity, that never actually becomes signification for us. And then he throws in another word which I cannot make sense of: femininity. And so the word feminine here is designed to capture the simultaneity of the fragility and the non-signifying. So I think of this as how the beloved is actually experienced for us, as opposed to the difference between the profane. The profane was the mode in which the beloved appears. This isn't in Levinas, by the way. I'm trying to understand the difference between the two, profane and the feminine. So I think of the profane as the mode by which the beloved appears, and the feminine is how we actually experience that mode, that appearing. And we experience it in terms of this fragility, which is right there, but is nevertheless not fully signifying. Always escapes the form that we try and understand it by. But the word femininity, there's really no excuse for using this word here. In the first place, we've already used this when we were talking about habitation, the dwelling, if you remember there, the feminine. So using it now here again in this section beyond the face, it's just confusing, I think. It's not a good idea. It was already suspicious in habitation. I already ruled on it as being not helpful at all. And the only reason he brought it in was to connect it to Eve, I think, when it came to habitation. And what we'll see here is the only reason he's brought it in here, I think, is because now we're heading to another woman, a famous woman in Judeo-Christianity, which is Mary, the Virgin Mary. More on that in a minute. But yeah, so the feminine, again, as with the way that he used it in terms of habitation, it can't make sense here without sounding patriarchal, without sounding sexist even. I mean, it's almost like a woman can only be the beloved, the passive recipient of love. They're never the active lover. I mean, if you define the way in which the other is, the beloved is apprehended as femininity, I mean, what is it that women are supposed to apprehend then? Femininity as well? It's just all kind of, I see no justification for this. It just makes his philosophy kind of sound as patriarchal and sexist as his religion is, which I think is a detriment to both. Enough ranting. I'm saving my rant for the end of the next video, right? But I have to say something about femininity there. So anyway, that's what he defines as femininity. An important part of the phenomenology of eros, the experience of love and the beloved, is the caress. So this is the primary movement in love for Levinas. It's not an intentionality because the other is transcendent. They're always an alterity. So the other is, the caress is not intentional. It's not directed towards something tangible, something completely immanent. Therefore, he calls it a searching, a seeking, in the sense that the caress can never achieve its goal. It's destined to be a perpetual seeking or searching, because its goal is an absolute alterity, absolutely other. So that's fine. The caress is a searching. That's quite nice. He points out that this is obviously different from Sartre's account of the caress, although I guess I'm not sure where Sartre got the caress from, or if he came up with it himself, but Levinas takes it on here. But he points out that this is different from Sartre's account because Sartre the caress for Sartre was an attempt to dominate, to possess the other, to kind of reduce the other, to possess the other as a for itself, as a transcendence. And the goal eventually was to, because if you could possess the other in their for itselfness, then they could ground your existence, they could justify your existence. That was the goal for Sartre. Levinas just points out this is nothing like what he's getting at here. So I've got a quote for you regarding the caress. In the caress, a relation yet in one aspect sensible, the body already denudes itself of its very form, offering itself as erotic nudity. In the carnal given to tenderness, the body quits the status of an existent. Okay, so we've got another word here, nudity, but again, this one's quite good. It captures this quite nicely, I think. The idea of the body denuded of form. So nude in the sense that there's no form, that the other, the beloved, the object of our love is never reducible to a form. They're always formless, and in that sense nude. They're not wearing any form, I guess is one way to think of it. So they're always nude. This is what erotic nudity is. Okay, nice. And that means that the body doesn't have the status of an existent. It's not a thing. It's not a biological thing. It's not a lived thing. It's not a thing in its kind of transcendent aspect, or it's, what's the word that he uses? We've talked about this. It escapes me, but in the kind of the sense of it being a for itself, not Levinas's term, obviously, but it's neither a thing like biology. It's not a lived thing like a consciousness or a transcendence. It's not even the face. It's not even the encounter with the face. And this is important because in the next quote, the beloved, at once graspable but intact in her nudity, beyond object and face, and thus beyond the existent, abides in virginity. Virginity, here we go. Okay, but before we discuss that, so the idea of the beloved is graspable as in their immanence, right? As that aspect, that immanent aspect of them towards which we can move, which we can caress, and yet always intact in their nudity, always pristine, always remaining kind of undefiled, despite our best intentions, despite our attempts to caress, to fully possess. It's not maybe the right word, but to fully kind of experience the carnal pleasure that's there. We can, but the feminine, because they are always intact in their nudity, they're never properly defiled, if you like. They always maintain their pristine nature, which Levinas then says is their virginity. So they're always, this is just, again, you can see how it kind of works, right? How there's this idea of the other as immanence and transcendence. There's a sense in which they never fully maybe give themselves completely to us. So they always maintain their virginity. But virginity really, I mean, obviously virginity has the connotation with the Virgin Mary. Hence, I said Levinas wants to connect this whole thing with femininity. And I think so that's where we are here. He goes on even further to call this the eternal feminine, which again just drives home Levinas's goal here of connecting this with the Virgin Mary. Yeah, okay, no ranting on that just yet, but that's there. He also, the passion behind the caress gets another name. So, like I said, there are lots of terms that Levinas throws at us here. This one is voluptuosity. So the voluptuous is this desire for the feminine. It's the passion behind the caress he calls voluptuous. And I don't know, I'm not so fussed with, not so keen on that one. I don't see how you get from what voluptuosity actually means to the idea that it's a desire for the feminine. Less religious connotation, but yeah, I struggle to see the connection why this needed to be called the voluptuous. Anyway, Levinas calls it that, so I'm mentioning it. He goes on then to talk about beauty a little bit. And so we're dealing here with the feminine, so talking about feminine beauty, and it's a beauty which is, as we said, it's kind of in the light, but never becomes full signification. So he describes this as the presence of non-signifyingness in the signifyingness of the face. That's what feminine beauty is. And when it comes to art, then, trying to portray this beauty, capture this beauty in art, the artist, he says, must give this beauty form, this originally formless beauty. He must capture it in some way and give it form. And this is the quote: "The beautiful of art inverts the beauty of the feminine face. It substitutes an image for the troubling depth of the future. It presents a beautiful form reduced to itself in flight, deprived of its depth." So that's just the only way that one can capture this feminine beauty, the non-signifyingness in the signifyingness of the face, by reducing it to a form, to try to take what is kind of beyond form, what is essentially the thing that gives the feminine its beauty, is that formlessness. It's part of it, but the artist, in order to portray it, has to give it a form, or obviously there's no art. So they have to invert the beauty of the feminine face. They have to take what is formless, what is originally nude, and clothe it with a form. And so in painting and sculpture, this happens using color and stone. And in poetry, the same thing happens, but just with rhythm. Form is kind of created as a vehicle for feminine beauty through rhythm. So the difference then between the encounter in the face and the encounter in love, in eros, in face, which is the encounter with the other, strictly speaking, this is accomplished in society and signification. We've talked about all of that. We talked about that in the last video, in the last section. It involves all of those things: discourse. It's the whole kind of moral dimension. Eros, however, which is an encounter with the feminine, is accomplished in voluptuosity and is primarily non-social. So Levinas talks about it being intimate, it being a fundamentally intimate mode of intimate relation, and supremely non-public. But what we have to remember with love, with eros, is that it doesn't transcend unequivocally. So it's never a full escape from oneself. it always comes back to you as the lover. So there is a transcendent aspect to it, but the transcendent aspect is in the beloved. But there's another aspect of the beloved, which is their immanence, and it's that which keeps us tethered to ourselves. So love is not a complete transcendence. It's not a complete getting out of oneself. It's a partial escape, an escape that always refers back to the I. And that brings us to the last section, fecundity. So fecundity is a going beyond the other in the face to an I which is other. And this is obviously a reference to the child. And Levinas, because he's operating from his Judeo-Christian background, calls this, or connects this with paternity. Not maternity, obviously, because the female is not the mother. The female is the beloved. It's the father who is the important aspect here. This is just one of the problems with kind of mixing your philosophy with a patriarchal, sexist religion. You end up making your philosophy patriarchal and sexist. You just can't escape it. But anyway, that's what he's done. So this is paternity. It's the idea of having a child. And what's important about this, in contrast to love, is that this is now a total transcendence. This is a complete transcendence. By a total transcendence, the transcendence of transubstantiation, the I is in the child and other. Paternity remains a self-identification, but also a distinction within identification. So, it's a total transcendence. Transubstantiation, that's another very suspicious word to use here. Again, very inventive, very clever that Levinas is able to bring these terms in and apply them in ways that you can't deny do fit. It's clever. Transubstantiation fits in nicely here. But okay, whatever. Transubstantiation, fine. More important point, I think, for us is that this is a total transcendence because the I, which I am, as the father, the paternal, the I is also at the same time an other. I am in my child, but I'm in my child not as me, as an other. And so it's a self-identification because I am my child, but there's also this distinction between me and my child. So we kind of get the best of both worlds in a way. But because my child is a completely separate other, then through this mechanism, I guess, I have achieved a complete transcendence of myself. The other in my child doesn't refer back to me. It doesn't bring me back to myself because it is this complete break. But it's never a full break because I am still in my child. There is still this self-identity, this aspect of self-identification. So I think this is a really interesting way of thinking about it. Actually, it's an interesting, philosophically speaking, it's interesting with the way that he connects this with his whole philosophy of the other, and you can see that. I think you can't really fault him for talking about the child as this complete transcendence, because it does make sense. There is the self-identification, but it's a self-identification within an other that is absolutely other to me, thereby securing this a transcendent movement. So a definition, in terms of a definition of fecundity, it's a relation with the future, which is my future, but not a future of the same. And this is another nice way of putting it, because it brings in the underlying core of Levinas's whole book, this distinction between totality and infinity, between immanence and transcendence. So a key idea here is this idea of discontinuity. Because if it was just an unbroken line, a continuous movement between me and my child, then it would fall into the category of the same. It would be a totality. I'd never be able to affect this movement of transcendence. So it's crucial that there is this discontinuity between me and my child. So the future that we're talking about here, that this future in fecundity, is not a possible, because a possible refers back to me directly. It's a part of my existence. It's a part of my world. It's a part of the same, which I am. And so Levinas calls this instead, that the future in fecundity, he calls it an absolute future, or infinite time. Fecundity continues history without producing old age. Infinite time does not bring an eternal life to an aging subject. It is better across the discontinuity of generations, punctuated by the inexhaustible youths of the child. So this time it's an infinite time. This future is an infinite time, because it's not a future of the same. It's not a simple reiteration of the I. It's the I. It is the I. It's the future of the I, but broken by this discontinuity, which leaps into the child as other. And that's what makes this, it's a way of achieving infinite time without having eternal life for a single subject. So, and that's quite, that's really interesting. It's a really, I think, a fertile, productive way of thinking of the other. It's just another dimension to Levinas's whole philosophy of the other, which is really fascinating. So it's time for a summary. So we started with love, which is a going beyond the other that leads back to the I. And the first part of this was the ambiguity of love. And this is just the idea that love is both immanent and transcendent. There's an aspect of immanence and an aspect of transcendence to it. There's that frailty, that fragility, paired with that non-signifying aspect of that transcendent aspect of the beloved. Then we looked at the phenomenology of eros, and basically the terms. So these were how we experience love, how love is concretely experienced by us. And the terms kind of capture this. The profane, which is I described as the mode in which the beloved appears, so that clandestine but also exposed at the same time. And then the feminine, which is, rather than the mode, it's more like the way we experience the beloved. We experience them as both fragile and yet as non-signifying, as both kind of thrown towards the light, but preserving themselves in the darkness. Another key term here was the caress, which we defined as a searching or a seeking. It's not intentionality. It's not an attempt to possess. It's because the other is always escapes our caress. We can't think of it as kind of a direct attempt, a direct intention to possess or dominate. And with the caress, we looked at voluptuosity, which is Levinas's word for the desire for the feminine. Finally, we looked at fecundity, and this is a going beyond the other to an I which is other. And so this gave us that total transcendence, which Levinas called transubstantiation, but we were able to completely get outside of ourselves. Through that, again, there is an ambiguity here, because my child is me, but is at the same time an absolute other. But it's more like the absolute otherness kind of takes precedence here. And so it's in that sense that fecundity is a true transcendence, as opposed to love, which ended up circling back to the I. And the other thing with fecundity, it was a relation with the absolute future, with infinite time. And this was the case because it was precisely not a reiteration of the same, not a reiteration of the I. This is what Levinas described this as infinite time. All right, that is where I'm going to wrap up this video. The next video we will finish up beyond the face. We'll look at subsections D, E, F, and G, and I'll have a little rant at the end about all of these religious terms that Levinas is throwing at us. But that's it for here. Thanks everyone. I'll see you in the next one.